Hi, I'm Brian DeForest, Chief Administrative Officer for the great state of Oregon, coming to you from the capital, Salem. Today we're going to talk about budgets and cost efficiencies. As odd as that sounds, it's one of my favorite topics of all time. I spent 27 years in the budget office of the state, and I'm glad that we are talking about this new post-COVID world of 2021. We have new federal funds that we never anticipated. We have competing interests for each of our general funds as we move forward and deliver services in new and innovative ways. Enjoy this conversation as we talk about this and other things in this month's edition of NASCA's Top 10 Priorities. Thank you.
NASCA TV, welcome back. We are here at the CAO Summit in San Diego, and I have just an incredible guest today, Misty Giles from the great state of Montana. Misty, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
This is going to be a good conversation. We've already had couple chit chats prior to turning the cameras on, and we're just going to kind of continue where we were heading. We're talking about budget reduction and cost efficiencies, which sounds like the most riveting conversation to have.
It is.
But we've also got some new CAOs in the mix, and so being able to share best practices, kind of what we have going on in our respective states, is what this is all about. So I want to kind of set the stage. We've got some programs statewide, and most of the CAOs are in the same boat. We've got programs statewide that need to be reduced, scaled back, but we don't want to lose the efficacy of the programs. And so we've got to think really creatively about how we do that and how we make that effective and efficient while saving the taxpayer some money and making sure we're running our ships on time, if you will. And so that's the job, that's the gig. How we get there, I'd imagine folks do differently, but we want to hear from you on how you're tackling that. Before we get there, I want to hear who you are. How'd you end up in Montana? You've got a little bit of a drawl. I think Georgia's home.
It is.
So connect the dots. How do we get from just south of Atlanta to just north of Atlanta or very north of Atlanta? Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Give me the backstory.
So it's actually quite comical. I could sit here and say, I plan to work in public service and I wanted to do good and all of those wonderful things. But truth be told, I charted out, went to college and graduate school, planned to go to law school.
Okay.
And fell in with the right folks that said, hey, you should join a campaign, think you'd be good at it. Worked with then Governor Sonny Perdue.
Okay.
On his re-elect. I chose a territory that was very challenging. First time I met him, he had said he heard about me, which is terrifying at 25 when you've never met a governor.
Your reputation preceded you to a governor. There we go.
My first reaction was, great, I'm fired. And instead he was like, oh, you're going to be the missile that's going to take Southwest Georgia. 15 years later, the man still calls me missile.
Wow.
But turned into being a policy advisor, had a large portfolio, promoted me up to budget director, had 45 agencies and $2.2 billion of the state budget under my control. Led Governor Deal's CJ reform efforts, helped write the bill and implement those, and moved over to an agency. And then again said, I'm out. I want to go be a lawyer, go back to what I planned. Actually did live in sunny San Diego, as we were talking about. Went to law school here at University of San Diego and focused on business litigation. Was the first part-time student to ever be editor-in-chief of Law Review and teach classes. Really proud of that, and had a law job lined up, going to live a very basic life. And then Sonny Perdue got nominated to serve as Ag Secretary and called me, asked me to move to Washington. I said no, because let's look around us. I didn't really want to leave this beautiful area, but I finally agreed and started out as senior advisor working on national policy issues, and then got promoted to rural development, chief of staff, ran that operation, 4,600 employees. $250 billion portfolio, and got a random call one day that incoming Governor Gianforte would like to talk to me about being in his cabinet and serving in this capacity and as a COO for the state. So took the meeting, and I think.
And now we're here.
Now we're here.
Now you're back in San Diego. There we go.
And I'm back in San Diego, which I'm really, really pleased. But it's been great. It's such a great job and great administration.
So I think there'd probably be a shorter list and a quicker synopsis of what you haven't done is what I got from that. With such a casual approach to 4,600 employees, couple $2 billion in budget and management. You've been a leader. You've been at the helm of quite a couple shops, it sounds like. How are you taking those experiences into a role in Montana as a chief operating officer? Like, what does that look like, and what translates?
So I think there's probably two major things that translates and really helps me. So first is working, Greg Gianforte is my third governor.
Okay.
So having been on the other side of having to deal with cabinet members and navigate issues across the state and really kind of understanding what they need. I was trying to figure it out as the major power ethos for the state and all the decisions that are on their plate. That's a big thing that helps me work with the cabinet, helping them think through things and being more enterprise-wide approach versus looking at things in a silo. And then honestly, my experience as chief of staff at rural development. I swooped in that job. We had full leadership change, and we were undergoing 31 operational realignments for all the programs. I had 4 principals across 2 years, and I was kind of the glue that kept it all together, and just learned a lot of lessons the hard way, because no one really prepares you for kind of being thrown to the wolves in that.
There's no class for that?
There's no class for that.
Course?
There's no class for that. Did read a lot of books, a lot of good trainings and things like that, but the takeaway there is it's really taught me how to, really look at things from a holistic approach. When you do have a national organization and you've got to break down those silos and try to find the common themes and threads. So those are probably the 2 biggest things I think that helped me kind of leap into this job and not completely fall flat on my face the first day.
I can't imagine falling flat on your face was ever going to happen.
I might have tripped a couple times though.
Haven't we all, right? And I mean, that's the beauty of NASCA is like we've all tripped. We've all been in your shoes. You've been in other folks' shoes, and like being able to share how we've navigated that, what that trip looked like, how it felt, how we avoid that. I like to tell students often, my job is not to be a teacher, it's to be 15 minutes ahead, point out the pothole that just jacked me up. And that is what I see so often here at this organization, being able to share that. And so I kind of want to turn to the strategy of reducing budgets. You just talked about a holistic approach, breaking down silos, like getting the big picture, the full picture of a thing, of a system, of an organization. I'd imagine there's a similar approach to looking at programs and thinking about scaling back. You've got to kind of look holistically at what's going on, who's it affecting, and then how do we start to pare back some of the bloat, some of the overspending to get to a good, responsible place. Like, talk me through the strategy of orienting to a program and then scaling it back.
Yeah, so we're in Montana, we're not necessarily looking at scaling back. You always want to save taxpayer dollars, but you do want to break something that's not broken.
All right.
So what we're really looking at is efficiencies and trying to do it from an enterprise-wide approach, and working with other members of the cabinet and the governor's budget director, really challenging cabinet officers to kind of look through and think, does it belong somewhere else? I've already realigned some programs that it's not that they're bad in government, they just shouldn't be in my wheelhouse. They belong to somebody else, and it's a duplication of services. Or should the government even be doing that? Kind of taking a different approach. I know privatization is a naughty word in a lot of states, but there's spaces for government. There's spaces that we should not be in, and the private sector can do it better. And then just seeing how you can be smarter with your resources and scale that back. Do you really need 10 people if you automate these 6 steps and then abolish these 5 regs and clean those up? You actually could probably do it with 3 and then move those other people over to another function that may actually, serve better for them as well in their career. So really going through this more of an efficiency analysis for us, in this top to bottom approach, and then simultaneously our governor instituted the Red Tape Relief Task Force.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, so we all know we have too many regulations in government. That's what we do best, especially coming from the federal level. They love red tape. So he created this task force, the Lieutenant Governor, Kristen Juris, she runs it for us, where we're challenging every single agency to go through and create a reg reform plan.
Okay.
And so, like, our environmental equality agency always comes top of mind. They're just bottlenecked in regulations. They'll be doing this for years. But meeting with stakeholders, we even had one stakeholder, because we created a website where, people can just put in their ideas, that it was such a good idea, it required legislation, and we just dropped it this session and went ahead and did it.
Oh,
so,
incredible.
Just really trying to think through all of those things, but it's really more about how can we be more customer focused and how we deliver our programs and do smarter with the taxpayer dollar. Because just like most governments, we don't think through it.
Okay, so we're talking efficiency. Like, I heard a lot of nuggets of common threads in a lot of the conversations we've had across NASCA. Efficiency, being customer focused. I mean, we've got constituents to take care of, to pay attention to, talking about, moving perhaps some programs that ought to be in the private sector to the private sector, and then kind of the bureaucracy of government, cutting through some of the red tape and like streamlining some things. And it sounds like, given all of the areas, your purview in your role, you've got a million places where you can kind of leave your mark and make sure that's working in the way it should.
Yeah, that is definitely true. Our governor makes each cabinet member, I shouldn't say makes, because that's it sounds like it's forced upon us. But he's a former businessman, and he makes us do OGSMs to kind of outline our strategies and deadlines and things like that each month, and then have like a 6-month focus. And it was so funny when I came into this role, I was like, oh, if I do all this, I'm not going to have something to present in 6 months. And as I peeled back the onion in my 8-month tenure, I'm just like, yeah, we're going to have like 5 terms. Like, there's no way. I mean, there's so many things, but you have to, pick your battles and, those 3 to 5 yard plays, and really, be strategic about what makes the most sense for the bang for the buck, and does that have to be done right now?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a balance of like, looking at your to-do list, and, some things are just too big, and it's like, that's going to take 2 or 3 years to do. There's nothing wrong with that, but let's pause on that one.
Right. Yeah, pick and choose your battles, for sure. I'd imagine data helps make some of those decisions, right? Like, some of it is gut, and you've been in the public sector a long time. You've probably got some ideas of like, yeah, it just feels right. But I'd imagine looking at the data that the state aggregates to make informed decisions and prioritize the list is really helpful. And then you mentioned the governor comes from the business world, and so data-driven decisions probably make a lot of sense there. How does that work? Is that something that you're intentional about? Is that something you're getting spun up, like using data to make better decisions? Where are you in that process?
So more getting spun up.
Okay.
So like a lot of governments, there's a challenge where everybody sits on data.
Sure.
It's mounds and mounds of it. There's
If
files.
I have it and you don't have it, you can't fire me, right?
You can't fire me. It's on an Excel sheet.
Sure.
Somebody's got it on some laptop, at home, whatever. And that's not new to Montana. We actually went through this exercise at USDA where we created a new structure, and I've kind of brought that best practice to the state of Montana, where we've hired a chief data officer. So he's working across the enterprise to set up a data governance structure, using Tableau, creating the data lakes, and really working together as a cabinet to see the commonalities.
Sure.
So it all exists, and you can ask for the data to use it in your decision making for sure, but you may get a spreadsheet with 10,000 lines both ways, and you better know how to do a pivot table.
You have the data.
Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting there, scrolling through for hours trying to find.
You got what you asked for, right?
Yeah, they will definitely give you the data, whether you can translate it.
Good, clean data that is actionable is really what we're driving toward.
Yeah.
So it sounds like with a hire, you've got a chief data officer making more informed decisions on better data is where you're heading.
Yeah, and the employees are really excited about it. The cabinet is obviously the governor, but it's really amazing to see the staff excited about it.
Yeah.
And the rank and file employees that, no, this can help you do your job easier. You won't have to go find the spreadsheet or download this. We'll just move the data into a data lake and create the dashboards and make it where it's usable and it updates real time, and their eyes just light up because they all hate when they get the data call request. Oh, the boss is going across the street, or she's trying to make a decision on something, so I have to like go find these 16 different spreadsheets and put it together and send it to her, and then she's going to call me and she's not going to understand the spreadsheet. So it's really empowering to see everybody kind of rally behind it. And I think it'll be something we'll be able to get off the ground like pretty easily. The chief data officer, he comes from the private sector. This is what he does. He's a data nerd. You need data nerds. And so we're so excited to have him, and it's just going to be great for the state of Montana.
Oh, that's incredible. We weren't heading down a culture route, but I think like we've ended up in a place to talk about culture, talking about the enterprise being really excited. You've got folks from public sector, got folks from private sector, but like rallying around, there's an ethos shift from the boss needs the data to, in order for us to do our job really well and serve our constituents, we need to get our data sorted out. And that helps us make better decisions. Sometimes it's incremental strategic moves. Sometimes they're large whole-scale decisions that are made to move in a big leap and a bound within the state. And like being able to balance those and using data to make those decisions, like it sounds like the entire enterprise is on board with that. And that's the exception, not the rule. It feels like. How'd you get folks there? You've been there 8 months, but like folks are excited. They're really stoked.
So I had a little bit of a heads up advantage, I think, there, because we're replicating a lot that was done at USDA, and I am kind of the perfect clientele to sell it to cabinet members and rank and file employees. So Sonny Perdue, when he was secretary, did the same thing. He wanted a chief data officer and wanted enterprise-wide data because he couldn't get data on anything when he was asking questions. So it drove him nuts as the cabinet secretary. And so the chief data officer at the top level of USDA worked across the 19 mission areas. And I remember when they came down there and we had these bureaucratic meetings, and I've got things on fire all across the country, and
Sure.
I'm eye rolling. I don't have time for this. But then, as the team started really working with him, and the data took shape. I mean, I became like a super big cheerleader and rallied behind it, and realized, I do love data, but it was just kind of going through that iterative process to get where you need to end up.
Yeah.
What do you even measure?
Yeah.
So what I did is actually asked some old friends at USDA to come present to Montana
There
and
you go.
show those toys real time. So it kind of took it out of the abstract.
Yeah.
And so you can see the power of it once you put it in the right format and really think through data governance and what you measure. And it just kind of helped jumpstart that, like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
I do want to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't have to buy anything else. It's like, no, we actually have all the IT tools. We just need the experts, and you to dedicate some people to talk to us about where is your data and what are your business needs and what do you need to actually measure and why and how will that help you in your job.
Yeah.
So yeah, I cheated a little bit.
No, you
there's
expedited
nothing
the
wrong with
process.
that.
No, absolutely. You expedited the process using your experience and connections, and you ended up in the role you're in because you do things like that. I mean, that makes a heck of a lot of
USDA
sense.
is always happy to show off because they did do a really good job and kind of spearhead that across the federal cabinet as well. And it's been something that's still growing and ongoing. So, they were happy to come show off to a
I think
state.
that'll be the trailer snippet. USDA is always happy to show off.
USDA's always had. You heard it here first. So I kind of want to shift to one of the terms you threw out, is customer service. Thinking about a constituency and how we support them. How do you hear from the constituents what they need? How do you facilitate the listening process? Is that town halls? Is that focus groups? Is that one-on-one, go grip hands and kiss babies? What does that look like to figure out what people need?
Yeah, so still working through some processes there. Obviously, my constituents are the state agencies,
Sure.
In large part. We do have the banking division where we regulate the banks, and and the banks that's just kind of a long-standing process. They're very good at just coming to us and saying, "Hey, this is a problem," and we work with them to fix it. So they're kind of the anomaly, I would say, in the group that's not really within the enterprise. So as of right now, it's really been working through the cabinet and stakeholders. Even, I hear from private companies all the time, like, hey, your procurement rules are a nightmare. Shocking. And it's like, well, can I meet with you as I start looking at procurement?
Yeah.
And you tell me specifically. I mean, you can't just tell me there's a bunch of red tape. Like, give me some examples. But what we are going to do at D of A is our big bread and butter of reform and trying to figure out customer service is not so much on the regulation side as we set all the policies for the state, much like my counterparts here, you've heard them talk about, is opening up a portal for state employees to kind of give us ideas of what should be cleaned up and things like that. So, but right now, no one's had a problem finding my phone number and telling me what's wrong. So I've been a little hesitant to get too far out.
Misty's new. Let's track her down. Let's tell her.
The random Georgian comes to Montana, and
There
so
we go.
everybody finds me pretty easily. So we're still working through those processes.
That's good. That's good. What are you most proud of? You've been in the role 8 months. You've gotten some things. I mean, kind of tying that last point you just made, like a portal for employees to share. You said you got something in from an employee and put that in.
Well, that was at the larger reg reform.
Okay.
It's out of the governor's office, so that's not at D of A specifically. I think what I'm most proud of, one is just more comedic, is surviving session. All of us in the cabinet in Montana joke that our session is biennial. And you would think, new directors coming in, new governor, that the legislature would throttle back a second and say, oh, it's okay, you're new.
Absolutely not.
And I was actually telling someone earlier that I got into Montana at Wednesday at 9:30 at night, and I had to testify before a PROPS on Friday.
All right.
And the throttle never backed off.
No, they probably ratcheted up. They said she's new. Let's get her in now, right?
That was a big win for the entire cabinet. The governor had a great session, got most of his agenda done. But I think specifically at D of A is really getting folks excited about enterprise-wide initiatives.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing a space study and a full HR, analysis statewide, looking at all of our lease space, all of our HR policies, a lot like what Tennessee and other states have done, looking at P cards. That's a weird little area that there's waste and abuse, thinking through that and looking at recruitment and retention. These things that are just commonalities and getting people really to kind of think in a broader box, which is, I understand from a lot of my employees, is novel to Montana.
Really?
But typically the agencies have worked in their silos, which is not unique. I saw a lot of that when I worked in the state of Georgia. So it's really exciting to have, a more collaborative approach to all of these things. And we're starting to kind of see some movement of stuff going downhill where we're going to get some cool stuff launched in the next few months.
So looking at waste and abuse, how much of this can you do unilaterally? Like how much needs to go through legislation? How much needs to go back to the cabinet? How much of that, can you just say go because it's in my purview and we can fix it?
So there's a couple different answers there. So D of A actually has a lot of authority on the books. It just historically has not been used. So, I have the same philosophy as, the governor does. If I see the ground, I take it. If it's not going to really harm someone else's business process. That being said, I also take from some lessons learned having served in an agency in a larger ethos, where I try to have a collaborative approach with the cabinet. And so when we have the cabinet meetings each month, I say, hey, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at reforming it. All of you have the same problems. I've looked at all of your data for you. I'm going to send it to you, and you tell me what you think, and then I'm going to change the policy. So try to give that feedback loop because the cabinet sees stuff that I don't see. And have that really collaborative approach. We do have some areas for legislation, especially in HR and things like that. So kind of excited for the next session to hopefully have couple packages that will help with procurement, HR, and things like that, and help streamline those processes and improve customer service overall. I
love it. So I'll ask kind of one parting as we wrap up. Just one, not even a curveball.
I'm a little scared.
No, I mean, again, we've kind of talked about 8 months in the role, but you came in hot, and you came in from federal and private, and you've kind of been all over the place, and you've got your bearings, it sounds like. If you had to give one lesson learned, one nugget kind of in your role, you've got fresh eyes, new perspective, different perspective, what would it be to share with your fellow CAOs?
Probably two nuggets. Get your team on board. We've heard a lot about that today. I have a kind of a looser management style where I don't have trust and transparency issues just a way. I was kind of brought up in management and how I work with my employees and having an open door policy and things like that, but you got to get your team right. If you don't have the people on the bus and following you, you're just a guy or a gal going on a walk. You're going nowhere. And then the other thing is not be afraid to take 3 to 5 yard plays. Take the ground. I think a lot of times in these roles, there's so many problems, they're so big, and you could just go down so many rabbit holes, and it's like, oh, we need to pull back the entire onion and get to the little bitty middle before we actually do anything. But I think it's critical to kind of try to take the ground when you see it and know that those incremental steps over time mean major change in the long run. You can't, that's just the way you got to get through all these issues.
All right. Just get your team on board. Small plays. Take the ground when you see it.
3 to 5 yard plays.
3 to 5 yard plays. I love it. So, NASCA, with that, we're wrapping up here live in San Diego, but by way of the Montana Department of Administration. Mr. Giles, appreciate you playing. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll talk with you soon.
Thank you.